Yesterday we are saying these three things. Anicca Viridava, that is, nature, impermanence is to be known. Anicca Lagana Viridava, the nature characteristic or the characteristic of impermanence is to be known. Anicca Nupassana Viridava, the anicca Nupassana or contemplation of anicca also is to be known. So when we are doing this for our general knowledge, this usage of such wordings may be slightly confusing for some people, in that one may get confused with anicca and anicca lakkhana, impermanence and impermanent characteristic. So today, Chara would like to explain this from the radical aspect. Suppose in the body there arises heat, and this heat, the sensation of heat, is anicca, the material thing, the material anicca, impermanent thing, or impermanent material thing, just anicca. Because initially there was nothing, and this heat arises from nowhere and passes away. That's why it is called anicca. It is not permanent. Because it is not permanent, it is impermanent. Because it arises and then passes away. It is an impermanent thing, or just impermanence. So, noting attentively this heat, one observes the beginning of it and the dissolution of this, the arising of this and the passing away of this phenomena, in this case heat. And initially there was nothing, abhavakaro, as is said in this way. Initially there was nothing, it came up, it appeared, and then passes away, it disappeared. So this is cause for impermanence, cause for the perception of impermanence. So here, heat is just impermanent thing, and the characteristic of arising and passing away is the characteristic of impermanence. In this way we can differentiate between these two things. And the same thing goes with other objects as they arise in your body, such as stiffness, tension, movement, hardness, softness, seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, tasting consciousness, contact, feeling, and so on. All these things are anicca, or impermanent thing. And the characteristic of arising and passing away is known as anicca lakkhana, the characteristic of impermanence. So while you are noting this heat, you know this as heat, sensation of heat, and then you also notice its passing away. Then you are able to understand or contemplate as impermanent. But this contemplation is at the moment of arising of the heat, as it is arising, during its arising. So while you are practicing mindfulness or noting heat as heat, you are contemplating this arising and passing away, not before or after it has arisen, not from your imaginations or fantasies, but at the very moment of noting. You observe its arising and passing away. Such is anicca nupassana, contemplation of impermanence. When you combine anicca and anupassana, it becomes anicca nupassana. And it also is called anicca nupassana jnana or anicca nupassana, contemplation of impermanence or knowledge of the contemplation of impermanence. In the beginning of the practice, one may not even see this anicca. In order to see this, one has got to practice mindfulness continuously, so that the mind is continuous. For 1 minute, 2 minutes or 3 minutes, the noting mind is continuous, and thus able to overcome these hindrances to progress. purifying your mind, thus be able to reach this Chitta Visuddhi, purification of the mind, or mental purity. Then one sees this mind body, which are anicca, or the impermanent mind and body, or mind and body as anicca. So in order to observe them, or observe this anicca, one has got to note attentively all objects of meditation. And as I said, only when at the very moment, note at the very moment of arising. At the very moment of arising can be anything. Arising can be seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, thinking, rising, falling, at the moment of lifting, moving, pleasing, or standing, and so on. There are many objects which can substitute this arising, which can become arising. So, of course, this has been explained before as well, just to make it more clear. One has got to mobilize these full mental powers, such as the power of aiming, training your noting mind on the object of meditation, precisely, to be precise. This is jhanic nature, noted attentively. Aiming or training is vitakka, and then this attentively is a jhanic factor. And also you have to employ this energy, and we have the driving force to sustain your noting mind on the object of meditation. And with constant alertness, constant diligence, wakefulness, if only you are able to employ these two mental powers, such as aiming and energy, you are bound to activate your mindfulness on the object to be noted. So as you are able to activate your mindfulness, the mind will fall on the object, intensifying, the concentration will be intensified. In this case, Khanika Samadhi, momentary concentration. So in order to cultivate Sati Samadhi and then progress along towards along the knowledge, inside knowledge, you need to employ these mental powers so that you'll be able to activate mindfulness and concentration, leading to Panya. So long as you have Sati and Samadhi, Panya will open up by itself. You don't have to do it purposely. And this kind of knowledge is not from hearsay or from your fantasies or from the books, but it is your own personal experience. And here you need these two mental powers in order to activate your mindfulness. Yes, this only when you are in the moment will you see sabhava. That is the niyama, fixed law. Sabhava means the individual characteristics or individual marks of this existence or mind body. For instance, Patavi, the earth element, has the characteristic of hardness, softness, harshness, and the Abo Dhatu, the water element, has the characteristic of flowing, cohesion, solidity, and the element of temperature has the characteristic of heat, cold, lightness, and the element of wind, Vayodhatu, has a characteristic of stiffness, tension, movement, and so on. And as for the characteristic of mind, it has the characteristic of knowing or cognizing the object, and the characteristic of Phassa has a characteristic of contact, Vedana has a characteristic of feeling. All these things are individual characteristics. Sabhava, they have these specific characters. Only when you are with the moment, will you see these individual things. Let us say when you are watching the abdomen and scanning these objects, main objects like rising or falling. Now, we use rising as, we just use this rising as a word, as a usage, but in fact it is made up of these sensations called stiffness, tension, movement. They are the realities, they are the real existing things, and they constitute this rising. They are the individual characteristics, and the falling also, the individual characteristics are relaxation, movement, softness, and whatever. All these things are known as sabhava, and also in the wind element also they have these sabhavas. All these things are the specific things. So only when you are with the moment will you see these sabhavas. That is when rising is taking place. As you note as rising, you're bound to see these characteristics, not before or after. Only when you are with them in the moment. At the moment of rising, will you see such things like stiffness, tension, movement. And as you know them as such, stiffness, tension, and movement. And when you note falling, you observe this relaxation, movement, softness, and so on. When you note lifting, you observe it as lightness, movement. And when you note movement of the foot, you observe pushing, pulling, movement. And when you note placing of the foot, you will observe heaviness, pressure, dropping motion, pushing, pulling, and so on. So all these sabhavas are observed at the very moment. Even these are the moment of closing and opening of the eyes, will be able to observe these things, sabhavas, such as stiffness, tension, movement of the eyes, of the eyelids. As you are staring, looking, without closing or opening, with open eyes, without closing, then you feel stiffened, tired, by just keeping the eyes open. And your eyes will be drying up and so on. You feel very unpleasant. These are the characteristics that you observe. And because you feel tired of keeping your eyes open, you wish to close them. So you do it. And when you are closing also, you will observe these many characteristics. So only when you are in the moment will you see these things. Here you see only these characteristics. Now, these individual things, psychophysical things, every psychophysical thing has three parts as it arises. Genesis, rising, and aging momentarily, very short moment, and then dissolving or passing away. These are three moments, time factor. They are not actual sabhavas. Or by method of Siddhanta, discourses, conventional discourse, we say it as beginning, middle, and the end. So, outside of Nibbana, every object has three parts, although they are brief moments. And they're known as the characteristic of time, or characteristic of duration, or characteristic of moment, or characteristic of condition. So, previously, they were non-existent, they came up, and then these things come up and pass away, or each object arises and passes away. So in this way, every object, be it mind or body, whether it is hardness also will arise and pass away. They are never stationary. They are not permanent, not even for a moment. Everything is in a state of constant flux, the old giving place to the new. So too with this object, in this case hardness and softness also will arise and pass away. And liquidity, flowing properties, solidity, and these things also, heat, warmth, coolness, all these things, stiffness, tension, movement, they all will arise and pass away. In this way, same thing goes with hearing, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching. All objects are in a state of constant flux. They arise and pass away. So, they are not free from this arising and passing away. Hence, they are said to possess common characteristic. In Pali is known as Samanya Lakkhana. So we have these three things: Sabhava Lakkhana, Sankata Lakkhana, that is the time factor or duration factor or condition factor, and this Samanya Lakkhana, the common characteristic. So Sabhava Lakkhana, Sankata Lakkhana, and Samanya Lakkhana. There are three characteristics. And only the Sabhava Lakkhana is the ultimate reality, which can be experienced, directly experienced through a personal practice. They are individual essences of state. So these Sabhava Lakkhana can only be seen with the mobilization of full mental powers. Again, as regards the Samanya Lakkhana, the common or universal characteristic is of three kinds, namely Anicca Samanya Lakkhana, the common characteristic of impermanence, the Dukkha Samanya Lakkhana, the universal characteristic of pain or unsatisfactoriness, and Anatta Samanya Lakkhana, the universal characteristic of not self. In other words, seeing this common marks of existence, such as anicca, impermanence is common to all mind, body. They rise and pass away. Therefore, they have these common marks of anicca, Samanya Lakkhana, the common characteristic of impermanence. Because they are in constant flux, rising and passing away all the time, they are impermanent. Seeing them, when one sees impermanence, one sees also painful nature of these objects automatically. Let us say when you're hearing a song, whatever sound, it may be desirable or undesirable sound, you just pay attention to this sound, listening to it, and after listening for some time, you feel fed up, you don't enjoy it anymore, even if it's a desirable song, a nice song or something, music. You don't want to hear the same music all the time. But you are hearing it, you feel painful. Something like when one is going to bed, he or she keeps an alarm bell, alarm clock by the bedside, and the clock is ticking away, and you don't want to hear this ticking, this tick-tick all the time. Although it rises and passes away, you feel wearied, fed up of hearing this tick-tick of your alarm clock. It is more obvious with the yogis in the course of the practice. They are observing things in constant flux, and they are convinced of this impermanent nature of things. And because they are impermanent, they are painful, they are not satisfactory. This can be seen automatically. So, rising and passing away, things arise and pass away, things are painful, unsatisfactory. So, whatever's impermanent and unsatisfactory cannot be self or soul. There's no atta in it. They themselves are not self or soul, nor there is self or soul in them. So they are conditioned things. They arise at their will, not at your will. So these characteristics of the three characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, or selfless or non-self, they are common to all mind-body objects. Hence, the three Samanya Lakkhana, common characteristic or universal characteristic, such as Anicca Samanya Lakkhana, Dukkha Samanya Lakkhana, and Anatta Samanya Lakkhana. If things arise and pass away, how can they be pleasurable? They cannot be pleasurable. They are unpleasant. They cannot be pleasant. You cannot wish them, and you cannot wish them not to come or to come. You cannot wish them so that every good things come to you, or you cannot wish that all bad things don't come to you. You cannot do that. They are all conditioned things. They arise through their conditions, cause and condition. Hence, there is no such thing as Parama Atta, Supreme Self or Soul. Atta is the one where the knowledge is said to be situated. So there are two things, Parama Atta and Jiva Atta. As for Parama Atta, Supreme Self or Soul, it is said in the text that it governs all, the whole universe, the whole world, all governing Ishvara, and know all, it knows everything, it knows all things, and Eko, it is one and only one, there is no two things, and it has no sukha, dukkha, no pleasure, nor pain, it has no form, it is neither form nor formless, hence there's no substance in it, such is given as Paramata and Supreme Self or Supreme Soul. And they said such things are Mahabrahma, the great Brahma, the Creator, and who commands you. And you live or die according to its command. It can command you to die or to live. So, as for the conditioned things, when they are bad, the condition is bad, then the effect will also be bad. When the condition is good, the effect also will be good. So, when you are hearing, for instance, because you hear the sound, because you have the ear to hear, and the sound is there, the sound, you hear that there's a sound waves, you hear it, and you have the ear, good ear, healthy ear, and then between the sound or the one who gives out the sound or speaks and the hearer, there is no hindrance, nothing is hindering you, no wall or anything to prevent you from hearing, and also there is this attention, advertence, you're giving attention. If you're giving attention, you are bound to hear it. If you don't give attention, you won't hear it. So only when you fulfill all these conditions, we'll be able to hear the sound of the voice. There's no such thing as Paramata, who causes you to hear or not to hear. And when all these conditions are fulfilled, such as you have the ear to hear, the sound is there, there's no barrier, you are adverting, giving attention, then you're bound to hear it, even if this Supreme Self or Soul will command not to hear, you're bound to hear. And even when these conditions are not fulfilled, and even if the Supreme Self or Soul will say, you must hear, you won't be able to hear. So all these things are due to cause and condition, not through the creation of this Supreme Self or Soul, because of the conditions such as the presence of ear, the sound, waves, and lack of this barrier in between your advertence or attention, you are able to hear these things. So there is no atta in them, no self or soul in them, nor are they self or soul by themselves. As regards to jiva, atta, individual self or soul, it is said to exist in every being, even in the insects, in the form of the soul, depending on the size. Its size depends on the size of the animal or being. In an ant, small ant, the atta will be very small, and so on. It's like a rubber, elastic. You can draw or pull or make it small or large, according to the size of the animal. So, with the arising and passing away, you are being tortured by the arising and passing away. You are said to be tortured by these impermanent things, because they are never permanent. They are in constant flux. So, I can't remember this. And this jiva atta is said to have certain powers, and it is said to be permanent. Although the body perishes, it doesn't perish. It moves from the old body which has perished to the new body, so it never perishes. So this is the kind of atta which is known as jiva atta, individual self or soul. But in fact, there is no such thing as atta, individual self or soul. It is anatta. There is no atta in it, nor they themselves are atta, self or soul. There are only mind and body which are arising and passing away. They arise due to cause and condition. They condition things. If the condition arises, then the effect, then they will come up as a form of effect. And when there is no conditions, they will not come up. In this way, there are only arising and passing away. You are being tortured by this arising and passing away of conditioned psychophysical phenomena. And because these arising and passing away are continuous, they cannot be satisfactory. So they are unsatisfactory. So you cannot prevent this, nor you cannot wish things to happen. They are uncontrollable. They are conditioned things. They are anatta. So in the practice, you are bound to see these things like anicca, lakkhana. Very clearly, the characteristic of impermanence, as you see the fleeting away of these objects, and you are being tortured, tormented by these rising and passing away of these objects, which are happening at their will, on their own, not through your will or through your own management. They are uncontrollable. So this niyama, the fixed law, no maxim, when you see anicca, you will see dukkha. I mean, when you see impermanence, you will see unsatisfactoriness or pain. Once you see everything, things in a state of constant flux, in the course of the mindfulness, you are convinced about the impermanent nature of things, and that you are convinced also that this arising and passing, you are being tortured by this arising and passing away of psychophysical phenomena. You come to observe, or you come to be convinced of this unsatisfactory nature of these things. Once you see, and also another niyama, fixed law, when you see dukkha, you will see anatta. Then when you see unsatisfactoriness, you are bound to see not self. Once you are being tortured by this arising and passing away of psychophysical phenomena, and you are convinced that they are happening on their own and their will, unmanageable. There's no, you cannot command. They are ungovernable. There's no such thing as isvara. And they are happening on their own. They are not self, not soul, anatta. In this way, once you see one characteristic, one lakkhana, you will see two other lakkhanas, as was said yesterday. And about this knowing the anicca lakkhana, dukkha lakkhana, the characteristic of impermanence, the characteristic of pain or unsatisfactoriness, and the characteristic of not self. Knowing them by observing, practicing mindfulness of these psychophysical phenomena, conditioned psychophysical phenomena, means this is just saying in brief, summarizing it. In fact, if we have to elaborate on these things one by one in detail, such as dukkha is to be known, unsatisfactoriness is to be known, and the characteristic of unsatisfactoriness is also to be known, and the contemplation of pain or unsatisfactoriness also is to be known. Then as regards anatta, there are three things again. Anatta is to be known, anatta lakkhana is to be known, and anatta nupassana, the contemplation of not self, is to be known. If we elaborate on these three things in detail, it is going to take at least 3 hours so as to convince you. So at this point, we just summarize it. Time is up.